"Excuse me, you're in my seat," the woman said, her voice low and calm, her first-class boarding pass held out like a shield. The man occupying 2A didn't even look up from his phone. He was in his late 50s, dressed in a suit that cost more than the monthly rent in the neighborhood Kendra had escaped from. He gave a dismissive wave. "There's been a mistake. This is my seat. Just find another one." Kendra Vance took a slow breath, the air in the cabin suddenly feeling thin. "There's no mistake. Seat 2A, you can check my pass." A flight attendant, a man with a name tag that read Jake and a harried expression, hurried over. "Everything all right here?" Before Kendra could speak, the man, whose boarding pass now lay conspicuously face down on his lap, looked up with a practiced, weary smile. "All good, just a little mix-up. This young lady is a bit turned around." The condescension was a physical thing, a subtle weapon. Jake's eyes flicked between them. He didn't ask the man for his pass. He didn't consult his own manifest. His gaze settled on Kendra, a black woman traveling alone, her quiet luxury apparently not convincing enough. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to take your assigned seat so we can continue boarding. We're on a tight schedule. I'm sure we can find you a spot further back." The words landed like a blow. A flush of heat crept up Kendra's neck, a familiar, bitter cocktail of humiliation and rage. Passengers were watching now, their glances a mixture of pity and annoyance. She was the disruption. She was the problem. What Jake, the entitled passenger, and every other person on Flight 227 did not know was that Kendra Vance was not just any passenger. She was the founder and CEO of Ether Systems, a revolutionary clean energy company that had made her one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the world. More importantly, the man who had just stolen her seat, David Sterling, was the CEO of Petrosynth, a fossil fuel giant whose stock had plummeted 18% the day Ether announced its breakthrough solid-state battery. And the airline, Global Unity, was currently in fierce, secret negotiations with Ether to retrofit its entire fleet, a deal worth billions that would make Petrosynth's aviation fuel contracts obsolete. Kendra's humiliation curdled into something cold and precise. She had spent her life being underestimated, being told to be quiet, to be grateful, to take a seat in the back. Not today. "Very well," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. She didn't argue. She didn't cause a scene. She simply turned, her carry-on rolling behind her, and walked down the jet bridge back into the terminal. As the plane door closed behind her, sealing David Sterling in what he thought was his victory, Kendra pulled out her phone. She didn't call the airline's customer service. She opened a secure app and typed a single, devastating message to her chief of operations and the head of her legal team. "Initiate Project Groundwire, Global Unity Flight 227, do it now." She stood at the giant window, watching the Boeing 787 be pushed back from the gate. The whine of the engine starting up was a familiar sound. But then, something strange happened. The engine spooled down. The red beacons on the wingtips went dark. The mobile staircase was driven back to the aircraft door. Inside the silenced cabin, the captain's voice came over the intercom, strained and utterly bewildered. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We are experiencing a ground hold. A mandatory safety inspection has been ordered. We are returning to the gate immediately. All passengers must disembark." On the jet bridge, now reconnected, David Sterling was one of the first off, his face a thundercloud of confusion and fury. He strode towards a group of confused ground staff, demanding answers. Kendra watched it all, a small, cold smile playing on her lips. She saw Jake, the flight attendant, standing at the gate, his face pale as he listened to his supervisor on the radio. He looked up and his eyes met Kendra's through the glass. The realization dawned on him slowly, then all at once. The quiet woman he had dismissed wasn't just a passenger who had been inconvenienced. She was a force of nature, and she had just grounded his flight. but to understand how a simple seat dispute could escalate into a multi-billion-dollar corporate standoff that would strand a plane full of people, we need to go back to where Kendra Vance's day began, in the pre-dawn quiet of a penthouse that looked over the city she was determined to change. The pre-dawn light was a soft, bruised purple over the San Francisco skyline. From the 60th floor penthouse, the city was a silent tapestry of shadows and distant, twinkling lights. Kendra Vance stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, a steaming mug of black tea cradled in her hands. She hadn't slept. Sleep was a luxury her mind rarely afforded, a constant whirlwind of algorithms, energy grids, and the crushing weight of a mission that felt both impossibly vast and urgently personal. Her penthouse was a reflection of her duality. On one side, it was a sanctuary of minimalist luxury, clean lines, muted tones, a single breathtaking painting by a Congolese artist that exploded with color and life. On the other, it was a command center. A bank of monitors, currently dark, was built into a sleek wall panel. A schematic of a new solid-state battery design was pinned to a magnetic board, covered in her precise, handwritten notes. This was the heart of Etha Systems, as much as the sprawling corporate campus in Silicon Valley. Today was the day. The meeting in New York wasn't just another boardroom presentation. It was a siege on the last bastion of the old guard. She was presenting her company's audacious, fully costed plan to the Global Unity Airlines board to retrofit their entire long-haul fleet with Etha's revolutionary battery technology. It would be the single largest private sector green energy initiative in history, a death knell for the aviation industry's reliance on fossil fuels. And David Sterling, the grizzled, notoriously ruthless CEO of Petrosynth, Global Unity's primary fuel supplier, would be in that room, fighting for his company's life. Her chief of operations, Leo, appeared from the kitchen, holding 2 tablets and looking as impeccably put together as always, despite the hour. The final projections are loaded. The mock-up of the retrofit module is en route to the hangar at JFK, and your blood pressure is, statistically, too high for a woman of 38. Kendra offered a faint smile. Leo was her anchor, her strategist, the only person who could speak to her with such blunt familiarity. A former military logistics officer, he had the calm, unflappable demeanor of someone who had seen real chaos and found spreadsheets to be a comforting constant. "It's just a meeting, Leo." "It's D-Day with better catering," he corrected, handing her one of the tablets. "Sterling won't go down without a fight. He's already launched 3 smear campaigns in the last month, questioning our tech, our financials, our—" He trailed off, but the unspoken word hung in the air. "You asterisk." He was questioning asterisk her asterisk. "I know," Kendra said, her gaze returning to the city. She remembered the article in a prominent business journal just last week. Etha's Ascent, Genius or Greenwashed Gambit. The piece had spent an inordinate amount of time speculating on her unconventional background and mysterious sources of initial funding. Subtle codes that she, a black woman from the south side of Chicago who had skyrocketed to the top of a white, male-dominated industry, understood all too well. "He's scared," she said, more to herself than to Leo. "And scared men who have a lot to lose are dangerous." "Which is why we're prepared for anything," Leo affirmed. "The car is downstairs. Your bag is packed. All you have to do is get on the plane, run through the presentation one last time, and land the deal that changes the world. No pressure." Kendra took a final sip of her tea, the warmth a fleeting comfort. The feeling of unease was a cold stone in her stomach, a primal instinct she had learned never to ignore. Something about this trip felt different. 2 hours later, San Francisco International Airport was a monument to controlled chaos. Kendra moved through it with the practiced ease of a veteran traveler. First class, TSA pre-check, the quiet lounge, these were not luxuries to her. They were necessary tools for preserving her energy, for creating pockets of silence in a demanding life. She was dressed for battle and boardroom in a custom-tailored navy blazer, dark trousers, and low heels. an outfit designed to command respect without ostentation. At the gate for Global Unity Flight 227 to New York, she allowed herself a moment of anonymity. No one looked twice at the woman quietly reviewing her tablet. They didn't see the billionaire disruptor. They saw just another business traveler. It was a cloak she sometimes cherished. Now boarding Global Unity Flight 227 to New York, JFK. We now invite our first-class passengers and Global Unity Elite members to begin boarding. Kendra gathered her things, a single, sleek carry-on and her leather portfolio. This was it. She joined the short line, her boarding pass ready on her phone. She was Kendra Vance, CEO. She was ready. The first-class cabin was a haven of calm. Sinking into the plush leather of 2A, a window seat, she stowed her bag and allowed herself a single, deep breath. This was her time. The 3-hour flight was a locked box of uninterrupted preparation. She pulled out her tablet, the schematics for the battery retrofit glowing on the screen. She was so engrossed she barely noticed the other passengers filtering in. It was the shadow that fell across her screen that made her look up. A man was standing in the aisle, his bulk blocking the light. He was in his late 50s, with a thick head of silvering hair and a tan that spoke of golf courses and vacations she didn't have time for. He was fiddling with his phone, a look of irritation on his face. Then his eyes landed on her. "Excuse me, you're in my seat," Kendra said calmly, holding up her phone with the digital boarding pass displayed. The man, David Sterling, though she didn't yet know his name, only felt a jolt of unsettling recognition, glanced at her screen, then back at her face. A slow, condescending smirk spread across his features. He didn't bother to look for his own pass. "I don't think so, sweetheart. This is 2A my seat." The sweetheart was a deliberate jab, a tool to diminish her. Kendra felt her spine straighten. "I assure you it's mine," she said, her voice dropping, the steel beneath the calm becoming audible. "The boarding pass doesn't lie." It was then that the flight attendant, Jake, arrived. He was young, probably new to the first-class cabin, his smile a little too eager. "Everything okay here?" David Sterling seized the narrative. "All good, just a little mix-up," he said, flashing a charming, man-of-the-world smile at Jake. "This young lady is a bit turned around." He leaned slightly towards Jake, a gesture of male solidarity. "You know how it is." Jake's eyes darted between the powerful, confident older man and the solitary black woman. The calculus was swift and brutally unfair. He didn't ask Sterling for his credentials. He didn't scan his own device. He made an assumption as old as time. "Ma'am," Jake said, turning to Kendra, his voice taking on a placating, firm tone, "I'm going to need you to take your assigned seat so we can continue boarding. We're on a tight schedule." He gestured vaguely towards the back of the plane. "I'm sure we can find you a spot further back." The humiliation was a physical wave, hot and suffocating. It wasn't just about the seat. It was the erasure. It was being rendered invisible, inconvenient, wrong in a space she had paid to occupy, in a life she had earned through sheer, brutal force of will. She could feel the eyes of the other first-class passengers on her, a mix of pity, curiosity, and annoyance. She was the disruption, the problem. Her mind raced. She could argue. She could demand to see the manifest. She could reveal who she was and watch this boyish attendant stammer an apology. But a deeper, colder part of her took over. The strategist. The woman who had built an empire by seeing 10 moves ahead. She looked at David Sterling, who was now casually settling into her seat, a look of smug victory on his face. She looked at Jake, who had already dismissed her, and she made a decision. "Very well," she said, her voice so quiet it was almost a whisper. It wasn't defeat. It was a declaration of war. She didn't look back. She stood, collected her bag and portfolio, and walked with deliberate, unhurried steps down the jet bridge, back into the terminal. The sounds of the gate area rushed back in, the garbled announcements, the crying bobbies, the mundane chaos of travel. She found a quiet corner near a massive window that looked out onto the tarmac. Her hands were steady, her breathing controlled. She pulled out her personal phone, the one with the highest level of encryption Etha could develop. She opened a secure messaging app, a system she and Leo called the bunker. Her fingers flew over the screen, her message stark and uncompromising. Leo, initiate Project Groundwire. Global Unity Flight 227, do it now, no discussion. She hit send, there was no going back. Project Groundwire was not a petty revenge scheme. It was a failsafe, a clause buried deep in the mountain of pre-negotiation documents between Etha and Global Unity. In the event of a material breach of good faith, or an act of bad faith that impacted Etha's leadership directly, Etha had the right to demand an immediate, independent safety audit of any and all Global Unity aircraft, specifically relating to any existing systems that would interface with Etha's technology. It was a legal sledgehammer, designed for worst-case scenarios. It had never been used. Kendra stood at the window, her arms crossed, and watched. The 787 was pushed back from the gate. The whine of its engine starting up was a familiar sound, the prelude to her journey. The aircraft began its slow taxi towards the runway. And then it stopped. The engines didn't just idle, they spooled down completely, their roar fatting into an unnerving silence. The red anti-collision beacons on the wingtips and tail went dark. For a long, confused minute, the giant plane sat motionless on the tarmac. Then, a service truck sped towards it. The mobile staircase was driven back and repositioned at the forward door. Inside the cabin, the confusion would be palpable. Then, the captain's voice, strained and utterly bewildered, would crackle over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We are experiencing a mandatory ground hold. A Priority 1 safety inspection has been ordered by regulatory authorities. We are returning to the gate immediately. All passengers must disembark. Please take all your carry-on items with you." Kendra watched, her expression impassive, as the first passengers began to trickle out onto the jet bridge. Leading the pack was David Sterling, his face a thundercloud of fury and confusion. He was barking into his phone, gesticulating wildly at a hapless ground crew manager. Then she saw Jake, the flight attendant. He was standing at the now-open gate door, his face ashen as he listened to his supervisor on a handheld radio. His eyes scanned the terminal, lost and bewildered. And then they found her. Their eyes met through the thick glass. His confusion was absolute. Then, slowly, like a dreadful sunrise, understanding dawned. The woman he had dismissed, the disruption he had sent away, was standing there, calm and still, watching the chaos she had orchestrated. She wasn't a victim. She was the architect. The humiliation on his face was a perfect mirror of what she had felt less than 30 minutes before. But in Kendra, there was no warmth of vindication. Only the cold certainty that the battle had just begun, and the first shot, silent and devastating, had been hers. Back in the Etha headquarters, Leo received the message. He didn't question it. He didn't ask for context. He simply moved. With the efficiency of a military operation, he activated the protocols. Calls were made to their legal team. The pre-drafted, legally unassailable demand for a safety inspection was filed with the FAA and sent to Global Unity's legal department. The reasons cited: potential concerns regarding incompatible systems, raised by an incident involving Etha leadership aboard a Global Unity aircraft. The system, designed to protect billions of dollars and the future of the company, had been triggered by a stolen airplane seat. The dominoes had begun to fall, and no one on Flight 227, especially not David Sterling, had any idea of the earthquake that was coming. The silence on the tarmac was profound. The giant Boeing 787, a symbol of modern travel and global connection, now sat as an inert, silent beast, its return to the gate a public admission of a profound failure. Inside the terminal, a low-grade chaos was building. Passengers from Flight 227 milled around the gate area, a chorus of confused questions and rising irritation. What's going on? A safety inspection. Now. I'm going to miss my connection. David Sterling stood at the center of the storm, a vortex of fury. He had his phone pressed to his ear, his voice a low, venomous growl meant for his executive assistant back in Houston. I don't care what they're saying, Margaret. Find out who gave this order. The FAA, the NTSB. This is a Petrosynth flight. We have contracts. This is unacceptable. He shot a glare at the Global Unity Gate agents, who were frantically trying to process the sudden, system-wide flag on their flight. Kendra Vance remained at her post by the window, a statue of calm observation. She watched it all, the frustration of the travelers, the panic of the airline staff, the impotent rage of the man who had stolen her seat. She saw the exact moment Jake, the flight attendant, was pulled aside by a stern-looking supervisor in a more senior uniform. She saw his shoulders slump, his hands gesture helplessly as he recounted the events at seat 2A. She saw the supervisor's head snap up, his eyes searching the terminal until they, too, locked onto her. This was no longer about a seat. It was a demonstration of power. It was a message to David Sterling, to Global Unity, to every person in that terminal who had witnessed her quiet removal. You underestimated me. You will not do so again. Her own phone vibrated. Leo. Inspection team mobilized. GU Legal is apoplectic. They're claiming breach of contract, harassment. Sterling's people are already screaming to the press about corporate sabotage. The narrative war has begun. Kendra typed a single word in response. Good. She then opened her email. There, sitting in her drafts folder, was a pre-written message to the entire board of Global Unity Airlines, CC'd to their largest institutional investors. The subject line was, regarding today's unfortunate but necessary safety precaution on Flight 227. She hit send. The email was a masterpiece of corporate judo. It expressed her deep regret for the inconvenience to passengers, framed the safety inspection not as an attack, but as a testament to ETHA's unwavering commitment to safety and due diligence. It then, with surgical precision, detailed the disturbing incident of bad faith that had precipitated the action, the unlawful removal of ETHA's CEO from her confirmed, paid first-class seat by a direct competitor, Petrosynth's CEO, and the failure of Global Unity staff to rectify the situation. It connected the dots, painting a picture of a coordinated attempt by Petrosynth to harass and intimidate ETHA leadership on the eve of a critical vote. It was a story, and it was a devastating one. Within minutes, her phone began to ring. She let the first 2 calls from unknown numbers go to voicemail. The third was from Robert Higgins, the octogenarian chairman of the Global Unity Board, a man known for his old-school decorum and immense power. Kendra, his voice was a low rumble, strained with a tension she had never heard before. What in God's name are you doing? Ensuring the integrity of our potential partnership, Robert, she replied, her voice cool and measured. I couldn't, in good conscience, allow ETHA technology to be integrated into a fleet whose operational standards allowed for the targeted harassment of its partners. This inspection is for everyone's protection. This is a theatrical stunt. He hissed. You've grounded a $300 million aircraft and stranded 280 passengers over a seating dispute. It stopped being a seating dispute the moment your crew chose to side with David Sterling against a paying customer and a potential billion-dollar partner, Kendra countered, her tone hardening. It became a question of judgment, of corporate character. I needed to know where Global Unity's loyalties truly lie. Now I do. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. She could almost hear the gears turning in Robert Higgins's mind, the calculations of stock prices, investor confidence, and the looming gargantuan value of the ETHA deal versus the entrenched, but declining, relationship with Petrosynth. "This is a mess, Kendra," he said finally, his voice weary. "A goddamn mess. We need to get on a call. Sterling is demanding one." "Of course," Kendra said, "but the inspection proceeds. The trigger has been pulled. The process is out of my hands now. It's in the hands of the regulators and your own maintenance chiefs. ETHA's only demand is transparency." She ended the call and took a deep breath. The first wave was complete. She had seized control of the narrative. Now she had to win the battle that would follow. An hour later, Kendra was installed in a private conference room in the Global Unity First Class Lounge, a space that had been hastily cleared for her. A large monitor on the wall was split into 3 video feeds. On the left was Robert Higgins, looking like he'd aged a decade, from his office in Atlanta. On the right was David Sterling, his face a mottled red, calling in from a noisy airport phone booth, his earlier smugness replaced by apoplectic rage. In the center was Kendra, calm, poised, and utterly in control. "Vance, this is an outrage," Sterling exploded the moment the call connected. "You're using federal regulations as your personal weapon because you didn't get your way. This is petty, childish, and I will see you in court for every cent you have." "David, your theatrics aren't helpful," Robert Higgins interjected, his voice tired. Kendra waited for Sterling to finish his tirade. She let the silence hang in the air for a beat after he was done, a tactic she used to unnerve opponents. "Robert David," she began, her voice devoid of emotion. "Let's be clear about the facts. David knowingly occupied my assigned seat. He lied to your flight crew. Your flight crew, without verification, ejected me, your guest and a key participant in today's board meeting, from the aircraft. This wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate act of aggression. Now, you can frame my response as petty if you wish. I frame it as a necessary and proportional demonstration of ETHA's resolve. We do not tolerate bad faith. We do not partner with companies that allow it." "You're trying to sink my company," Sterling shouted. "I'm trying to build the future," Kendra corrected him softly. "Your company, David, is the past. It's a relic that pollutes the sky and fights progress at every turn. Your attempt to intimidate me today only proves that." "The board will never vote for your proposal after this stunt," Sterling spat. "That remains to be seen," Robert Higgins said, his gaze fixed on Kendra through the screen. "Kendra, you've made your point, spectacularly. What is it you want, right now?" "I want the inspection to continue, unimpeded," she said. "I want a public statement from Global Unity acknowledging the failure in protocol and reaffirming your commitment to impartial partnership. And I want the board vote to proceed as scheduled this afternoon, with the full understanding that ETHA's terms are non-negotiable. Any attempt by Petrosynth to derail this deal will be met with the full legal and financial force of my company." "You can't dictate terms like this," Sterling protested. "I just did," Kendra said, her eyes locking with his on the screen. "The question is, what is Global Unity going to do about it? Are you going to side with the man who caused this chaos, or with the partner who holds the key to your future profitability and public image?" She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a near whisper that was more threatening than any shout. "The world is watching, Robert. Your passengers are watching. Your investors are watching. Choose." The call ended with no resolution, only a tense agreement to reconvene after the initial inspection findings. Kendra sat back in the plush leather chair, the adrenaline beginning to ebb, leaving a hollow, tired feeling in its wake. This was the part she hated, the brutal, personal warfare. She had wanted to win this deal on the merits of her technology, on the sheer, undeniable power of its efficiency and environmental benefit. But the David Sterlings of the world never fought on merit. They fought on power, on privilege, on intimidation. Her phone buzzed again. It was Leo. "The press has the story. My doing, headlines are, aggressive. Billionaire showdown grounds flight. Seat snub sparks corporate war. Your email to the board has been leaked. Sympathy is, surprisingly, with you. The harassed tech visionary versus the bullying oil baron. It's playing perfectly." A grim smile touched Kendra's lips. Leo was a maestro. He had taken her nuclear option and turned it into a PR victory. She stood and walked to the window of the conference room, looking out at the still-grounded 787. It was a symbol of her power, yes, but also of the staggering disruption she could cause. The lives of 280 people were on hold because of a clash of egos and corporate titans. She felt the weight of that, a sobering counterpoint to her victory. Down on the tarmac, she saw a team of inspectors in hard hats and safety vests boarding the aircraft. The process was in motion. There was no stopping it now. The next few hours were a blur of strategy calls, legal briefings, and monitoring the news cycle. The story was everywhere. Talk shows were debating it. Social media was alight. Memes were born, photos of empty first-class seats with captions like "reserved for disruptors." Kendra Vance, the quiet genius, had been thrust into the spotlight as a warrior. Finally, as the afternoon sun began to cast long shadows across the tarmac, Robert Higgins called again. His voice was different, resigned, final. "The preliminary inspection is clean, as we all knew it would be," he said. "But the damage is done. The board has taken a preliminary vote, Kendra." She held her breath. "We've seen the media coverage. We've read the investor emails. They're intense. And we've seen Petrosynth stock drop another 5 points in the last 2 hours." He paused. The vote was 8-3 in favor. The ETHA retrofit deal is approved. Pending final contract signing, the Global Unity fleet will be the first all-electric long-haul fleet in the world. The air left Kendra's lungs in a slow, controlled exhale. She had won. She had taken a moment of profound personal humiliation and turned it into the single greatest victory of her career. "There's a condition," Higgins added, his voice firm. "A personal one from me to you." "Name it," Kendra said. "Never," he said, the word heavy with meaning, "ever pull a stunt like this again. We are partners now. We solve our problems in the boardroom, not on the tarmac. Understood?" "Understood, Robert," Kendra said. "Thank you." As she ended the call, a profound silence settled over the room. She had done it. She had changed the world, one grounded flight at a time. She gathered her things, her body humming with a mixture of exhaustion and elation. Walking out of the lounge, she passed the gate for the now-canceled Flight 227. A new flight was being scheduled for the stranded passengers. She saw Jake, the flight attendant, helping an elderly woman. He saw her, and for a moment their eyes met. There was no anger in his gaze now, only a kind of awestruck fear. He quickly looked away. Kendra didn't feel triumphant. She felt tired. She had gotten her seat in a manner of speaking. She had gotten her deal. But as she walked towards the exit to the car Leo had sent for her, she knew the cost. The fight had required a part of her soul, a hardening she wasn't sure she wanted. The battle was won, but the war for the future, and for the person she would have to become to lead it, was just beginning. The sky outside was darkening, but for the first time in a long time, it felt full of possibility.